Okay, so before we start, just a calendar note, and I'll send this out in the email after when I send the link to the recording. Next week is during the holiday of Sukkot. It's a day. It's the last intermediate day, and it's called Hoshana Rabbah. Every day we parade with the lulav and etrog. That's called Hoshana, uh, based on the first word of the prayer that's recited when we do that. So the service is longer than than a regular weekday service, but shorter than a holiday or Shabbat service. So we're starting at 8 o'clock. It should be over about 9:30, but I think we should start next week at 9:45. Okay, so try to remember next Friday, 9:45. I'll try to remember the to adjust the shul calendar appropriately, and there'll be updates on the emails also. Okay. So, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shekidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We continue in the, well, here comes Marlene. So.
Yeah, Bess, I saw that on the news.
Not anybody did, right? So just thought I'd.
That's why.
Yes. Okay, so we continue with chapter 19 in the book of Joshua, continuation of rather dry material about how the land of Israel is being divided up. So this is a long chapter because it deals with the rest of the tribes and their portion. So we're on page 109. 109. Vayetze hagoral hasheni l'shimon, lemate v'nei Shimon lemishpachotam, vayehi nachalatam betoch nachalat b'nei Yehuda. So the lot next, the second lot fell to Shimon, to the tribe of the children of Shimon, to their families, and their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the children of Judah. Vayehi lahem benachalatam be'er sheva v'sheva umolada. So in their inheritance is be'er sheva and molada. Ve'chatzar shu'al uvala va'atzem. And Chatzar Shu'al and Bala and Atzem, Ve'el Tolad, Uvetul, V'chorma, Ve'tziklag, Uve'tar Markavot, Ve'chatzar Susa, Uve't Levaot, Ve'sharuchen, Arim Shloshesrei V'chatzreihen. So all these cities, these 13 cities and their villages. Ayin Rimon, Ve'eter Va'ashan, Arim Arba v'chatzreihen, and these 4 cities and their villages. V'chol hachatzerim asher svirot ha'arim ha'ele ad ba'alat be'er Ramat Negev, zot nachalat mate v'nei Shimon lemishpachotam. And all the villages that are around these cities until Ba'alat Be'er Ramat, until Ba'alat Be'er, the height of the Negev. It just says Ramah of the south. Okay, but Ramah is a raised, elevated place. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Shimon for their families. Verse 9 on page 111, Mechevel b'nei Yehuda, Nachalat b'nei Shimon, Ki haya chelek b'nei Yehuda rav mehem, Vayinchalu b'nei Shimon b'toch nachalatam. Out of the allotment of the children of Judah was the inheritance of the children of Shimon, because the allotment of the children of Judah was too much for them, that it was bigger than they needed, and the children of Shimon inherited amidst their inheritance. Verse 10. So again, I don't know if this is real time. This is how the allotment happened, and then the people started to settle there, or the people settled there, and then they said that they did a lottery to explain how it is that they ended up in those places. So, right, what's that?
Oh,
Yes?
wait.
No, go ahead.
Isn't it unusual to say, I have too much land, I'll share it? Isn't that, I have too much land? Who says
Right.
that?
So again, I don't know how accurate this account is. Again, the book is making it seem that this is happening in real time, but I'm saying I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if this book was written after the fact, how much after the fact it was written. I think it's an early book, whenever it was written. I think it's early in biblical literature, but still, I can't say that it's directly from the time of Joshua. Okay, verse 10, Vaya'al hagoral hashlishi livnei zevulun lemishpachotam vayihi gavul nachalatam ad sarid. So then the third lot fell to the children of Zebulun to their families, and the boundary of their inheritance was up to Sarid. Va'ala gevulatam la yama, umar Allah, ufaga badabashet, ufaga el hanachal asher al pnei Yoknaam. And the boundary, the border went up westward to Mar Allah and touched on, and touched on or reached Dabashet, and then touched on or reached the stream that is next to Yoknaam. Veshav misarid kedma mizrach hashemesh al gvul kislot tavur v'yatsa el hadovrat va'ala yafia. And then it went back to Sarid eastward, toward the sun, to the boundary, to the border of Kislot Tavur, and then it went down to Dovrat and went up to Yafia. Umisham avar kedma mizracha, gita chefer itan katzin, v'yatsa rimon hamitoar hanea. And there it went eastward to Gat Chefer, to Eit Katzin, and went to Rimon, Metoar, to Nea. Venasav oto hagvul mitzafon chanaton, vehayu totzaotav gei yiftach el. And then the border turned to northward of Chanaton. It's interesting. There's a kibbutz Chanaton in a spot that they think was this Chanaton, and that's the kibbutz of the conservative movement near the Galilee, and it's very close to the city of Tzipori. So that's where kibbutz Chanaton is. Is that the ancient Chanaton that's described here? Don't know. So anyway, the boundary went northward to Chanaton, and then it went down to Gei Yiftach, or the valley of Yiftach El.
Jonah,
Yes.
is Yafia any relation to Jaffa?
No.
Next to Tel Aviv?
What's that?
I know it's got a
It has a yud and it has a fe, but it does not have a hey.
Okay.
Name Yafa would be yud fe hey, and this is Yud Fe Ayin. Actually, the root word would be pei. I don't know if it's pei Yud Ayin or pei Vav Ayin. My grammar is not good. My father would be able to say whether it's a pei Vav Ayin or a pei Yud Ayin. That I don't know.
It's
But
interesting. None of these places sound familiar. So their names
Right.
have all been changed.
or right. So the commentary below suggests what the modern names are, whether
Okay.
they're Arab villages or not. There is a town of Yoknaam. We saw Yoknaam in this Zebulun's places. The other places, like I said, Hanaton I know about that from Kibbutz Hanaton. Other places, we don't know what happened to them. And it's difficult to put them on a map. If you look in the Eitz Chaim and the maps in the back, some of these places will be there on the map. I'm not sure how much of it is a guess as to where it might have been, or actually based on archaeological discoveries.
Some of them sound Arabic. Philistine.
Yes, I'm not sure. Not sure about that. I'm not sure when the Arabic language started. I don't think Arabic was around in the time of Joshua yet. So I don't know.
What did they speak in Canaan before the Israelites came?
There was a Canaanite language, and so I don't know if that was a Semitic language or not. So you'd have to Google that. Is Canaanite a Semitic language? Because there's a Phoenician language, and I'm not sure that's Semitic.
Is Ugaritic a language, or was it an ancient
Ugaritic is a
language?
language. It's a pre-Hebrew language. Ugaritic and Akkadian are the original Semitic languages. So I don't know what Canaanites spoke. It was a Canaanite language, but I don't know. I don't know if any Canaanite words ended up in the Bible or not. And again, I don't know if it's considered a Semitic language. I have a feeling it's not, but I don't know. What does it say?
It is.
Canaanite is
Canaanite languages. A group of northern, central, or northwestern Semitic languages, including Hebrew, Moabite, Phoenician, and Punic.
Okay, so I don't know so that doesn't answer the question. What did the indigenous Canaanites speak? What were they speaking as opposed to what were the Israelites speaking? Okay, so the Israelites were speaking Hebrew. What were the Canaanites speaking? I don't know. Okay, 15, V'katat v'nahalal v'shimron v'yid Allah uvet lachem arim shtem esrei v'chatzreihen. So these are the cities. This Bethlehem, by the way, for Zebulun is not the Bethlehem in Judah. It's a different Bethlehem. 16, Zot nachalat b'nei Zevulun l'mishpachotam ha'arim ha'ela v'chatzreihen. This is the inheritance of the children of Zebulun to their families, these cities and their villages. 17, L'Yissachar. Now, note that there are two letter sins there for Yissachar's name. And it looks like, if we were just looking based on how Hebrew is pronounced, if you just look at the name Yissachar, based on the rules of decoding Hebrew, it looks like it should be read Yisashar. And that this is an exception to the rule. You do not pronounce the second sin. Notice that there isn't a dot on that second sin. So it could be a sin or a shin. There's no dot on it. It's there, don't know why. But for Yissachar's name, and if you spelled Issachar in English, it would be two S's. Why it's spelled with two letter sins, I don't know. But I do know that it's just you ignore the second sin. Okay, that's just the one exception to the Hebrew. Decoding Hebrew doesn't have too many exceptions. This is one of them. LeYisachar yatsa hagaral harevi'i livnei Yisachar lemishpachotam. So the fourth lot came out to Yisachar, to the children of Yisachar and their families. Vayihi gevulam Yizraela v'hakesulot v'shunam. So their boundary went to Yisrael. So I don't know if that's the valley of Jezreel, or if there's a town called Jezreel for whom the valley is named. I don't know. So, and Kesulot and Shunam. V'chafarim v'shion v'anacharat. V'harabit v'kishon v'avetz. V'remet v'ein ganim v'ein chada uveit patzetz. Ufaga hagavul betavor. V'shachatzima uveit shemesh. V'hayu totsaot gevulam hayardain. Arim sheshesrei v'chatzehen. And the boundary went up to Tavor and Shachatzima and Beit Shemesh, and then the boundary went out to the Jordan River, these 16 cities and their villages. Zot nachalat matei b'nei Yisachar lemishpachotam ha'arim v'chatzreihen. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Yisachar to their families, the cities and the village and their villages. 24. Vayetze hagaral chamishi lamate b'nei Asher lemishpachotam. The fifth lot went out to the tribe of Asher and their families. Vayihi gevulam chelkat v'chali v'aveten v'achshaf v'alamelech v'amad umishal ufaga becharmel hayama uveshichor livnat. So you had these cities, and then it touched on Carmel westward and to Shichor Livnat. Veshav Mizrach Hashemesh Beit Dagon, Ufaga Bizvulun, Uvenei Yiftach El Tzafona, Uveit. I was just looking at the English. Beit Ha'emek U'ne'iel V'yatsa El Kavul Mismol. So then it came back eastward to Beit Dagon and touched on Zebulun territory and Uvegei Yiftach and the valley of Yiftachel northward to Beit Emek and Ne'iel, and it went down and it went out to Kavul on the left side. Ve'evron Urachov ve'chamon ve'kana ad Sidon Rabbah. Okay, so these cities up to Greater Sidon. So that's like in Lebanon. I think that's where I think, I'm not sure. That could be, that northward up to Greater, because Sidon is a city in Lebanon. So I'm not sure that this Sidon is that Sidon. Veshav hagavul harama le'ad ir mivtzar sor. Veshav hagavul chosa vehayu totzaotav hayama mechevel achziva. And then the boundary went back to Ramah, to the city of Mivtzar Sor, or the fortified city of Tyre. So Tyre, that's in Lebanon also. And then the boundary went to Chosa, and then it went westward from Chevel to Achziv. Now Achziv is a place name that's north of Haifa, south of Rosh Hanikra, and it's supposed to be like a beautiful beach there. So Achziv is there today. The city of Tyre in Lebanon is there, just north of Rosh Hanikra, and Sidon is up there too. Zot nachalat matei v'nei asher lemishpachotam ha'arim ha'ele v'chatzreihen. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Asher according to their families, these cities and their villages. Livnei Naftali, Yatsa Hagaral Hashishi, Livnei Naftali lemishpachotam. So the sixth lot went to the children of Naphtali and their families. Vayihi Gevulam me Chelef me Elon Batsa'ananim Va'adami Hanekev V'yavneel Ad Lakum Vayehi Totsaotav Hayarden. So the boundary went from these cities to the Jordan River. Veshav Hagavul Yama, Aznot Tavur, V'yatsa Misham Chukoka, Ufaga Bizvulun Minegev, Uva Asher Paga Miyam, Uvihuda Hayarden Mizrach Hashemesh. So the boundary went westward to these cities, and then went to Hukok, and then touched on Zebulun territory in the south, and Asher in the west, and Judah in the east, on the Jordan River. Ve'arei mivtsar hatzidim tser vechamat rakat vechinaret, and these fortified cities, and Va'adama, V'harama, V'chatzur, V'kedesh, V'edrei, V'ein chatzur. So these cities too, V'yir'on, Umigdal El, Charem, Uveit Anat, Uveit Shamesh, Arim Cha'esrei V'chatzreihen. So these 19 cities and their villages. Zot Nachalat Matei V'nei Naftali, Lemishpachotam ha'arim v'chatzreihen. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Naphtali to their families, the cities, and their villages. 40. Lematei v'nei Dan lemishpachotam yatsa hagoral hashvi'i. So the seventh lot went out to the tribe of the children of Dan to their families. Vayehi gvul nachalatam. So the boundary of their inheritance, Sar'a ve'eshta'ol ve'ir shamesh, ve'sha'alabin ve'ayalon ve'yitla, ve'elon ve'timnata ve'ekron, ve'el teke ve'gibeton uve'alat, ve'yehud uve'nei Barak ve'gat rimon. And Bnei Barak we know about. So Bnei Barak today is just outside of Tel Aviv. Is that this Bnei Barak? Maybe, because there's also the Ayalon in verse 42. So there's an expressway in the Tel Aviv area called the Ayalon, and there's a little stream there called the Ayalon. So is Dan's territory around Tel Aviv today? So we'll see in the commentary about that. It's unclear where Dan's territory is, because there, if you look at the map in the Eitz Chaim, Dan appears both in the way north, like up north of the Sea of Galilee, way close to the Syrian-Lebanese border there. That's considered Dan, right? There's an archaeological site to visit, Tel Dan, the archaeological site of Dan. So was Dan there, or was Dan down here in the Tel Aviv area near the Philistine territory? It's unclear. Maybe both. How is that possible? Why are some Dan in the north and some Dan in the south? How is this possible? We'll see if the commentary talks about it, but it's certainly if Bnei Barak today is this Bnei Barak, which a lot of cities in Israel try to like replicate where it's thought the cities were, then it's interesting.
Was the Don in the north, was that the one that had another temple?
Yeah, there's an altar there, and yeah. 46, Umei hayarkon v'harakon im hagavul mul Yafo, and the waters of Yarkon and the Rakon and the border against Jaffa. So yes, so this is the area then of Dan in the time of Joshua. Vayetze gvul b'nei Dan mehem v'ya'alu b'nei Dan lemikla. No. V'yilachamu im leshem v'yilkedu ota v'yaku ota lefi cherev v'yirshu ota v'yeshvu va v'yikru leleshem Dan kishem Dan avihen. So the boundary of the children of Dan was Vayetze gvul Dan mehem. So the border of the children of Dan was too straight for them. I don't get that. The boundary went out. Well, so just yeah. The commentary says this is not the rendering of the Hebrew, which is literally, and the border of the children of Dan went out for them. Okay, we'll look at the commentary, but anyway, the boundary went out. That's what the Hebrew says. And the children of Dan went up and fought against Leshem and took it and smote them by sword and possessed it and dwelt there. And they called Leshem Dan, according to Dan, their father, or the original Dan. All right, so it's giving us a footnote about how Dan acquired this town of Leshem. Yes, Bess?
The straight in English here is
I know.
S-T-R-A-I-T.
Right. So we'll look at the commentary in a little bit.
They mean,
What?
Okay.
What?
do they mean water? Do they mean straight, a water between two
We'll see.
connecting bodies of
We'll see.
water?
We'll take a look at the commentary soon when we get there. I want to just read through it with the translation and then go back and do all the commentary. 48, Zot Nachalat Mate B'nei Dan, Lemishpachotam Ha'arim Ha'ela V'chatzrehen. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Dan, according to their families, these cities and their villages. Vayechalu linchol et haaretz ligvuloteha, vayitnu b'nei Yisrael nachala lihoshua binun betocham. So they finished inheriting the land according to its borders, and the people of Israel gave an inheritance to Joshua, son of Nun, among them. Now Joshua was an Ephraimite, so verse 49 is pointing out that Joshua got his own territory, that his own land holding, that the entire people of Israel agreed upon should be just for Joshua. 50, Al pi Adonai not nulo, et ha'ir asher sha'al, et timnat serach, bahar Ephraim, vayivne ha'ir vayeshev ba. So according to God, they gave him, or according to the word of God, or the commandment of the Lord, I wouldn't say the commandment, according to the word of God, they gave him the city which he asked, Timnat Serach, on the Mount of Ephraim, and he built there a city and dwelt there. So we don't have a record of Joshua asking for his own territory, but it says in verse 50 that he asked for territory and the people of Israel agreed. And then according to God's word, but where was God's word? God didn't say, okay, now we're going to give Joshua his own piece of land within the tribe of Ephraim. And why did that even have to be said? Because every family and every tribe got their land holding. So it would be assumed that Joshua got his own. Why did there have to be a separate kind of special session to say Joshua's going to get his own land? So we'll see if the commentary talks about that too. Ela hanechalot asher nichalu Elazar hakohen v'Yehoshua bin Nun v'Rashei ha'avot lematot b'nei Yisrael b'goral b'shilo lifnei Adonai petach ohel moed vayechalu mechalek et haaretz. These are the inheritances that Eleazar the Kohen and Joshua son of Nun and the heads the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of Israel it gave out apportioned according to Lot in Shiloh according before God at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and they completed dividing the land. I just want to point out that there's an unusual cantillation mark on Yehoshua bin Nun. Okay, so all the cantillation of the book of Joshua, if we were to sing it, it would be according to the Haftarah tune. Okay, so because Joshua is part of the section called the prophets, so the cantillation marks here. If you were to sing the book, you sing it according to the Haftarah tune. Okay, but in the Haftarah trup, we never, in any Haftarah throughout the year and special occasions, you never get the trup that appears on Joshua son of Nun, the top of page 120. And so I don't even know how to sing it. Yes, Bess, go ahead.
Is this the same Eleazar, Aaron's son from
Yes,
the desert,
yes.
40 years? How did he
Yes.
cross over?
Uh,
I'm dividing this up while they're in
maybe
the
he
wandering.
was only those 20 years old and over who left Egypt died in the desert. So maybe he wasn't 20 years old left yet. But so I that's the only way I know how to answer you. So Eleazar's still alive, and at the beginning of Joshua, when they're setting up the camp in Gilgal, Eleazar's there doing the work with his rest of his family. So he didn't die. We know that his son Pinchas is going to take over when Eleazar dies, and it's possible that Eleazar is going to die by the time the book of Joshua is over, but he's still alive. So your point is well taken, and the only way I can answer it is that he wasn't 20 years old when they left Egypt. But Aaron was 83 when they left Egypt. So ages are irrelevant in the Torah. So okay, so the apportioning of the land is concluded. So let's go back to the beginning of the chapter and look at the commentary on this. So back on page 109, on the right-hand side on the bottom. The second lot of the 7 tribes in the midst of Judah. The reason is given in verse 9. See also chapter 14. That is that there's too much land for Judah. Nevertheless, the portion assigned to Shimon within the land of Judah was exactly defined as the following verses show. In the course of time, the tribe merged with Judah and lost its separate identity. Consequently, when the country split into 2 kingdoms, the southern was known as the kingdom of the 2 tribes, namely Judah and Benjamin, not 3. Okay, so we're just foreshadowing biblical history here. So verse 2, Beersheba, see chapter 15, with Sheva. The Hebrew is literally and Sheva. Kimchi, one of the medieval commentators, excuse me, comments that both are counted as one city. Otherwise, the total would be 14 instead of 13. Perhaps one city was within the limits of the other, or the text is to be understood as the well of Sheva and the city of Sheva. Malbim, another medieval commentator, counts them as 2 cities, considering Beit Levaot and Sharuhen as 1. Okay, so just trying to figure out the numbers here to make it jive. Moladah, see chapter 15. Chatzar Shaul, see chapter 15. El Tolad and Betul, see chapter 15. Hormah, see chapter 12. Ziklag, see chapter 15. Beit Markavot, the name signifies the house of chariots, and Chasar Susa, in 1 Chronicles, the village of horses. They may be identical with Madmanah and Sansana in chapter 15. The names indicate that they were stations of passage, and like those which are now to be seen on the Great Line of Indian Transit between Cairo and Suez, depots and stations for the horses and chariots, such as those which in Solomon's time went to and fro between Palestine and Egypt. Okay, Beit
In,
Levaot.
in
Go ahead.
train systems of India at the time of this edition ran the trains in Egypt.
India Transit. So I don't know what well, I think the whole point of the Suez Canal is to connect Europe with India. So I think that's what it means by Indian transit. That along the Suez Canal, there were stations for horses and chariots. I don't know, it's 1950s or even earlier, 1920s, whenever this was originally edited. That's their point of reference about what Egypt was like. This says 1950 was the original. So,
Chariots, wow.
okay, Beit Levaot, called Levaot in chapter 15, Sharuhen, doubtless the same as Shilhim in chapter 15. Sharuhen was apparently the Egyptian name of the town. Ancient Egyptian records indicate that this city served as an Egyptian military base in the Negev during the Israelites' bondage in Egypt. Ain Rimon, C15, Eter and Ashan, C15, Baalat Be'er in the Negev, called Baal in 1 Chronicles, Ramah of the south, to distinguish it from the other towns of that name elsewhere. For example, Ramot in Gilead, which we'll see in chapter 20. It's probably identical with Ramot of the south in 1 Samuel 30. 111, 9, out of the allotment for etc. Just as their allotments were together, so they fought together. The inheritance of Zebulun, unto Sarid, but not including that town. It's now Tel Sadud in the north of the valley of Jezreel, where the Jewish settlement of Kivutzat Sarid has revived the ancient name. Their border went up over the sides of Mount Carmel. Westward, literally seaward, reaching the sea by the Bay of Akko, so fulfilling Jacob's prophecy, Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. The strip which extended to the sea formed an enclave in the territory of Yisachar. Daveshet, some identify it with the ruins of Dabsha in the south of Upper Galilee. Others identify it with Kfar Yehoshua. The brook, a small tributary of the Kishon, called by the Arabs Wadi Milch. Yokneam, see chapter 12. It turned from Sarid eastward, that is, discontinuing this direction, but beginning again from Sarid, the boundary from this point extended eastward. Unto the border of Chislot Tabor, but not including it, the town belonging to Yisachar. Verse 18, where it's called Chesulot. It's 2 miles southeast of Nazareth. Dovrat, now Deburija, near Mount Tabor, 4 miles east of Nazareth. This city also belonged to Yisachar. Yafia, now Yafa, southeast of Nazareth. The phrase went up is explained by the following description. For 3/4 of an hour we wind through picturesque glens, their beds green with corn, and their banks dark with the foliage of the dwarf oak, hawthorn, and wild pear. Yafa now appears on the top of a tell, down in a glen on the right. So this is some travelogue, Porter Handbook, Volume 2. Gat Hefer, the rabbis identified it with Govevata of Sepphoris. It may be the modern Meshed, 3 miles northeast of Nazareth. It was the birthplace of Jonah. Rimon metoar unto Neah. The revised version renders Rimon, which stretches unto Neah. It is now Rumaneh, 6 miles northeast of Nazareth. Neah is otherwise unknown. It's named here only as a further delineation of Rimon and is not included in the enumeration of the 12 cities. The border turned about it. It apparently refers to Neah. The boundary skirted Neah and proceeded to Hanaton, which some identify with Kfar Hanania of the Talmud, the modern Kefer Anan, on the border of the Upper and Lower Galilee. The valley, this valley is mentioned again in verse 27. No one knows exactly where it is. Some believe that it is Wadi al-Khalidiyah, which flows into Wadi al-Malik, tributaries of the Kishon, which flows into the valley of Beit Netophah. Some believe that it's one of the upper tributaries of the Naaman, which flows into the valley of Beit HaKerem in Galilee. Iftachel, apparently a wadi in the south of Upper Galilee. The western boundary is not given because it marched with the border of Asher, defined in verses 24 to 31. And Katat, that is the border, included the towns Katat, etc. Katat in Judges 1:30. Kitron is called Kitonit in the Jerusalem Talmud Tractate Megillah, south of Sepphoris. Nahalal, identified by the rabbis with Mahalal, west of Yafia. This city was not conquered until later. There is now a Jewish settlement of that name in the valley of Jezreel. Nahalal, yes, that's a famous, one of the first settlements by the pioneers over 100 years ago. Shimron, see on chapter 11. Idalah, identified by the rabbis with Chavrayah, now Huvareh, near Shimron. Beit Lechem of Galilee, northwest of Nahalol, and not to be confused with the better known Beit Lechem of Judah. The inheritance of the children of Zebulun, dwelling by the coast and its territory consisting largely of mountainous regions, this tribe turned to seafaring and commerce and became the entrepreneur for the rest of the nation. The Jewish Maritime League for developing the sea resources of modern Palestine has assumed the name of Zebulun. We're on page 113. Jezreel, now Serene, in the plain of that name. Chesulot, called Chislot Tabor in verse 12, now Iksal on the western side of Mount Tabor. Shunem, now Shulem, north of Jezreel. It occurs several times in the Bible as the encampment of the Philistines before their victorious battle of Gilboa against Saul, in which he lost his life. Avishag's native town, the place where Elisha often lodged. Yeah, there's a Haftarah, put that story in it. Chafaraim, perhaps now the ruins of Parieh between Megiddo and Yokneam. Anaharat, now Ein Naura, east of Shunem. Rabit, the modern Rabbah, 13 miles northeast of Nablus, a large Arab village. Kishion, a Levitical city of uncertain location. Remet, a Levitical city called Yarmut in 21. Ein Ganim, literally the spring of gardens, now the Arab city of Jenin, in the southern extremity of the valley of Jezreel. It's famous now, or infamous now, with a refugee camp there, and the Israeli army has done incursions into Jenin. So it's interesting that the J sound in Arabic is the Gimel sound in Hebrew. So the G and the J are interchangeable between Hebrew and Arabic. All right, so in Arabic they have the J sound. In Hebrew does not have the J sound, which is also interesting because Arabic does not have a P sound. So go figure how languages develop. Okay, a spring rises in the hills behind the town and passes through it. Another place with this name occurs in chapter 15:34. Ein Hadah, probably Hadida, southwest of Yavneel. Tabor, a city by Mount Tabor. Beit Shemesh, now the ruins of Shemsin, southeast of Yavneel. There were towns of that name in the territory of Judah. 114. Chelkat, a Levitical city. Achsaf, see chapter 11. Alamelech, thought to be a city near the Wadi Malek, a tributary of the Kishon. Amad, perhaps El Ahmed, west of Bethlehem in Galilee. Mishal, a Levitical city called Mishal in 1 Chronicles 6. Some identify it with Misali in extreme north of the plain of Sharon. To Carmel westward, that is, to Carmel, which is situated in the west. Elijah of Vilna, that's who lived in the 1700s, and Malbim render in the Sea of Carmel. This view is shared by Yonatan, that's the Aramaic translation. The sea adjoins the mountain range of Carmel near the valley of Zebulun. Shihor Livnat, the river of Livnat. This is one of the rivers in the northern sector of the country, probably called Livnat, because of the white sands that abound there. This is probably the Nahar Ez Zerka, or Crocodile Brook, which rises in the Carmel and flows into the Mediterranean just north of Caesarea. This verse defines the boundary between Asher and Menashe. Beit Dagon, Beit Djen, near Akko, and reach to Zebulun, that is the territory of Zebulun. Iftahel, yes, go ahead, Bess.
In the book is differing again, the two versions.
Yes.
And the one that Barbara and I have on Shihor Livnat, they have the same thing about the Crocodile Brook.
Yes.
But then they add a quote,
Yes.
or the editor adds, I suspect that long ago, some Egyptians accustomed to worship this ugly creature settled here, Caesarea, and brought their gods with them. Once here, they would not be easily exterminated, for no better place could be desired by them than this vast jungle and impractical swamp. Thompson.
Right.
Okay, that's quoting
Yeah.
Thompson. This verse defines the
right, which is how ours ends. Right. I don't know why the updated edition doesn't include these older scholarly comments. Maybe that those scholarly comments were found to be false. The theories there about how this could be the crocodile place. Maybe the scholarship was found to be wrong. Okay, so Beit Emek, now Amka, 7 miles northeast of Akko. Kabul, it still bears the ancient name and is situated 9 miles southeast of Akko. This verse defines the boundary between Asher and Zebulun on the north and the west. And Evron, instead of continuing with the description of the border, the text enumerates important cities within the territory. Evron, many Hebrew manuscripts read Abdon, as in 2130 and 1 Chronicles 6, now called Abdeh. Rehov, a Levitical city, it has been identified with Rahubu, north of the Kishon. Cana, southeast of Tyre, even unto Great Zidon, Sion 11, all the cities up to Zidon were included in Asher's portion. And the border turned, the frontier between Asher and Naphtali is defined. Ramah, now Ramia, east of Chanita, the fortified city of Tyre, not the well-known Phoenician city on the coast. It may perhaps be the latter of Tyre, Ras and the Kankura, a coastal towns. Okay, so I was wrong. So it's not the Lebanese city of Tyre, it's a different city. From Hevel to Achziv, this is perhaps a reference to the city in Lebanon by this name mentioned in Kaftor Vaferach. Jonathan, the Aramaic translation, however, renders from the lot of Achziv. That is, from there, the border ended at the Mediterranean Sea. Rashi, too, follows this interpretation. Achziv is believed by some to be the town of Ez-Zib on the south coast of Tyre. Uma, a comparison with Judges 1, suggests that this town is identical with Akko, the modern Akka on the coast north of Carmel. Afek, called Afik in Judges 1, its site is doubtful. Rehov, see on verse 28, if this is a different place, there are 2 towns of the same name in the land of Asher. 22 cities, this number is confirmed if Hevel in verse 29 is not the name of a town. Otherwise, Achziv is not included as a town of Asher, but as a region. This is the inheritance, Asher. Much of this territory remained in Canaanite hands for a long time, and many cities, for example, Sidon, Achziv, Rehov, and Aphek, were never conquered. Judges 131. The two northern kingdoms of Tyre and Zidon retained their identity for hundreds of years after the conquest. The rabbis commented on the extraordinary fertility of Asher's portion. The territory of Asher extended from Nahar Zerka on the south to Zidon on the north, and contained some of the richest soil of the country and the maritime portion of the fertile plain of Esdraelon, and commanded all the approaches to Palestine from the sea on the north. Its soil well fulfilled the prophetic descriptions of Jacob and Moses. Here Asher could dip his foot in the oil of his luxuriant olive groves, such as still distinguish this region, and fatten on the bread, the fruit of the rich plain of Phoenicia and his fertile upland valleys. He could yield royal dainties, oil and wine from his olives, and vineyards and milk and butter from his pastures, while under his shoes was the iron ore of the southern slopes of the Lebanon and the brass or copper of the neighboring Phoenician territory. Possibly through its wealth, aided by its proximity to the unconquered Phoenicians, the tribe degenerated and lost all importance. Its ties with the rest of the nation were weak, and Deborah contemptuously alluded to its isolation. Asher dwelt at the shore of the sea instead of joining in the fight against Sisera, and Avidet by its bays. By the time of David, it was so insignificant that it was omitted from the list of the captains of the 12 tribes of Israel. Page 116, Helef, probably somewhere near Lake Hula. Elon Bet Sa'ananim, in the vicinity of Kedesh Naphtali. Adami Nekev. AV construes as two separate places, with which interpretation the rabbis agree, though the accentuation of the Masorah supports AJ. So in other words, we're not sure how to pronounce this town. The rabbis identified Adami with Damin, now Damia, west of the Sea of Kinneret, and Hanekeb, understanding Ha as part of the name, not as a definite article, also west of the Sea of Kinneret. Yavneel, identified by the rabbis with Kfar Yama, southwest of the Sea of Kinneret. The ancient name has been revived in a modern Jewish settlement on that site. Aznot Tabor, perhaps literally the ears of Tabor, denoting some peaks of that mountain. Hukok, now Yakuk, 4 miles northwest of the Sea of Kinneret. And to Judah at the Jordan. That is the region on the east side of the Jordan inhabited by the Yairites, who on their paternal side belong to Judah. Others, following the accentuation of the Masorah, the way that we're supposed to decode the Hebrew, which disjoins from what follows, render and reach to Asher on the west and to Judah. The Jordan was toward the sun rising. That is, the Jordan marked its eastern boundary. Others explain that since Judah bordered on the southern end of the Jordan, and the entire Jordan belonged to Naphtali, Naphtali's border met Judah's at the Jordan. Actually, Naphtali's border met that of all the tribes that bordered on the Jordan. Judah is singled out to tell us that Naphtali's border met even Judah's, which was at the extreme south, and certainly that of all the other tribes north of it. Other theories are, this refers to the city of Bezek, conquered by Judah and Shimon. This was located south of the Kinneret in the vicinity of the valley of Beit Sha'an. Or this refers to the village of Seid, Judah, on the eastern arm of the Jordan. All right, so this reference in the verse to Judah causes all this commentary as to what could that mean relative to its border. And the fortified cities, etc., that is the fortified cities of Naphtali. We do not find fortified cities in any other tribe except the fortified city of Tyre, which belonged to Asher. These are probably needed to protect the northern boundary. Sidim Zer, some translate as two separate cities, which is in agreement with the interpretation of the rabbis. They identified Sidim with Kfar Chitin. The exact location of Zer is unknown, but it was in the neighborhood of the former. Hamat, near the hot springs of Tiberias or of Gerar. Rakat, the rabbis identified it with Tiberias. Kinneret, see on chapter 11. Adamah, possibly identical with Adami in verse 33. It's accordingly at both a border city and a fortress. Ramah, west of Safed, Chatzor, see chapter 11. Kedesh, see on chapter 12. Edrei, not to be confused with the well-known Edrei in Bashan, it's otherwise unknown. Iron, now Yarun, Iron, now Yarun, northeast of Gush Halav. Migdal El, some identify it with Mejdel Islim, near Kedesh Naphtali. Others hold that it's the ruins of Migdal, south of Mejdel Islim. Beit Anat, it may be the modern Ein Ata, 6 miles west of Kedesh. Beit Anat and Beit Shemesh, the latter being unidentified, were not conquered. 19 cities, since 24 are enumerated, it must be assumed that some of the places do not belong to Naphtali, but were only defined, though not included in that tribe's territory. The boundaries of Dan, the border. This is not delineated in the same way as that of the other tribes, but only by the cities which it included. The reason is that Dan was enclosed by Ephraim and Benjamin in the north and east, and by Judah in the south and southeast, so his boundaries coincided with theirs. Sarah, Eshtaol, see on 15, they belonged to Judah and bordered on Dan. It's also possible that these were not the same cities mentioned above. Sarah is the modern Sar'a, 15 miles west of Jerusalem, and Eshtaol, east of the former, is now called Eshua. Ir Shemesh, see chapter 15. Sha'al Abin, the meaning is perhaps the place of foxes, called Sha'albim in Judges 1, where it's stated that it and Ayalon remained for a time in the hands of the Amorites. Some think it to be Selbit, west of Ayalon. Ayalon, a Levitical city, now Jalo, east of Emmaus. The valley of Ayalon is mentioned in chapter 10 and was doubtless named after it. Itla, possibly Beit Tuel, between Kiryat Anavim and Ayalon. Elon, conjectured to be the ruins of Di Olin near Beit Shemesh. Timnah, C15, Ekron, C13, Eltekeh and Gibton, included among the Levitical cities in chapter 21. The latter fell into Philistine hands. Their sites are unknown. Baalat, Josephus places it near Beit Horon. It was fortified by Solomon, where it's named in connection with Beit Horon, the Nether. It may be the modern Belaim. Yehud, now Yehudieh, 8 miles east of Jaffa, a Jewish settlement is in its vicinity. Bnei Brak, to the west of Yehud, now Ibn Ibrak. In Mishnaic times, it was the scene of the famous Passover Seder, at which 5 rabbis spent the whole night expatiating upon the exodus from Egypt. A rabbi who visited Bnei Brak saw goats grazing under the fig trees, while honey was flowing from the trees and milk ran from the goats, and these mingled with each other. This is indeed, he remarked, a land flowing with milk and honey. In modern Palestine, a new settlement bearing the original biblical name has been founded in the neighborhood. Gat Rimon, a Levitical city, its site is not precisely known. There's now a Jewish settlement of the same name, probably close to its biblical site. Me Yarkon, near Jaffa. Rakon, possibly Tel Rakit, with the border over against Joppa. This famous seaport did not pass into Jewish hands until it was captured in the 2nd century BCE by Shimon Maccabeus. It appears several times in biblical history. To it, the cedar and pine wood needed for Solomon's temple were conveyed by Hiram, king of Tyre. The same materials were brought there for the rebuilding of the second temple. Jonah boarded a ship to flee from the presence of the Lord at Jaffa. Was too straight for them. This is not the rendering of the Hebrew, which is literally and the border, that is, the territory the children of Dan went out from them. AJ is probably based on Kimchi and Mitsudat David, who explained the border of the children of Dan came out in a lot that was inadequate for them. They therefore required additional land, which they acquired by waging war with Leshem. Rashi explains the verse literally, interpreting it thus: the children of Dan took part of their inheritance here, and they also received a lot elsewhere far from their border, with other tribes intervening between them. Others explain, okay, so that could be how Rashi explains how Dan is located in two different places. Others explain that Dan's territory was unconquerable by them, since the Amorites did not allow them to go into the valley. They were able to conquer only the western border. Leshem or Laish was on the east. Fought against Leshem, see Judges 18. Leshem is a variant of Laish. Dan, now Tel El Kadi, the mound of the judge. Dan in Hebrew signifies as judge. The inheritance of Joshua will finish here, and we'll look at ancient Israel next time on this section. According to the commandment of the Lord, this command was possibly conveyed to them through the Urim and Tumim, or it may be that a divine promise was made to him as to Caleb, see chapter 14, although not recorded. Unlike the rest of Israel, his portion was not chosen by Lot. Timnat Serah, also called Timnat Heres, the picture of the sun, because they set up a figure of the sun on his grave to perpetuate the miracle he performed by halting the sun. Others maintain that its original name was Timnat Heres. It was called Timnat Serah because its fruit would rot because of its extreme richness. It is now the ruins of Tibnah, 17 miles northwest of Jerusalem. Joshua was buried there. He built the city. This probably means that he added to the existing buildings. It is indeed noteworthy that Joshua, the great leader who brought Israel into the Holy Land, should request but a small town whose land is not fit for cultivation or whose fruits are inferior. Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, see on chapter 14. This verse ends the account of the division of the country. The tent of meeting had been erected in Shiloh 14 years after the Israelites had entered the land. See on chapter 18. Okay, so
I hate to say it, but 51 has a longer note in the other book. You want to save it for next week?
yes, remind me of that for next time.
Sure.
We'll look at that. Yeah, I'll just make a note there too. Yeah, on Eleazar the priest. Okay, I see it. Yeah. Okay, very good. So we'll get back into some more rich narrative after we finish the commentaries on this chapter. It should get a little bit better soon. All right, have a good rest of the day.
Can't get worse.
Well, can't get worse, that's true.
Okay.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank
you,
Shabbat shalom. Chag sameach.
Have a good one.